Hello, everyone. People are slowly coming in after lunch, but I think we have to start. Otherwise, it's going to be delayed. So hopefully there will be more people coming before Rafael is starting his lecture. Now Amelia is coming in, so I think I will wait just 1 second for her. No. Okay, I will start. So we have the next speaker is Rafael Sardá, which is a senior scientist at the Spanish National Council of Research, working in a small place, very beautiful place apparently, Blanes, in Costa Brava, close to Barcelona. And he's doing research on the coastal and marine socio-ecological system in this unit. He's also collaborating with a lot of business schools worldwide, so different business schools in different places of the world. And he's co-founder of the Business and Environmental Group of the Global Alliance of Business Schools. His research has been mainly on applications in the frontier between social and ecological systems, how they work and interact, how to cope with present and emerging local and global environmental problems, and what role does science play for regulating these problems. So the topics are more coastal zone management, ocean governance, soft bottom marine benthic ecology, and sustainability. So a wide range of topics related with marine biology. And also, last but not least, Rafael asked me to say that a very fundamental characteristic is that he's a big, big supporter of FC Barcelona. You should all know that. Okay, Rafael, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a nice introduction, and it's true. The important thing is that it's true. I'm a big supporter. Thank you for the invitation. I promise to you to be much more creative than the title of the talk, which is basically to put 6 words in your talk. So, but I will do a better job probably than just what is in the title. I'm going to talk about marine ecology, but basically it's much more on the side of environmental science. Huh? So, of course, if you imagine the Sustainable Development Goals and you imagine marine ecology, Sustainable Goal 14 is life below water, marine ecology. So every one of us is doing, well, every one of the audience that is a marine ecologist is doing something for this particular goal. So this is the job, but I think that I'm going to pass to you messages in which probably we need to do this job for sure, because it's our profession, but something else. Huh? And there's something else goes in line a lot with what Wolfgang said at the very beginning, which is basically the same I was prepared for you. If you have seen The Day of Tomorrow, in The Day of Tomorrow, there is one moment in which one guy says, all the guys that are under this latitude should be evacuated, the other will die. So I'm not going to say that all the older guys in the audience are going to die. We will die soon, but anyway, we will die. But the talk is much more on this 20-something, 30-something, 40 middle. That's and I promise to you to give you a final message, and this final message basically is for this particular audience. Okay, so talking about The Day of Tomorrow, it came to me because of your talks. I don't know how many of you saw these things, but maybe the Americans, yes, but in the New York Times last August, it was an editorial in one particular weekend about climate change. It was a 30-40 pages article, fantastic article, talking about the science of climate change, and the basic message is that we all know what happened in the 70s. The basic science of climate change, we know it from the 70s. In the 90s, if you follow the records that we have had from the 50s to the 90s, we knew it in the 90s that we will be in 450 in 2030. We are going to be there in 2030. Why? Because the planet economy of the world is decided until 2025. We are not going to change anything. Because, and the Americans that are in the audience will agree with me, Donald Trump is going to win the next elections in US. So it means that all the planet economy for the entire world is decided until 2030, so we are not going to change. We are going to be there in 2030. So This is the situation. And we know it because it's an exponential curve. What we don't know is the consequences. So now we're facing the consequences, but we know that the point is there. So just saying that, we need to react, and we need to do something else. This something else is what is needed, but I promise I'm not going to talk about climate change. I'm going to talk about marine ecology, and always putting this particular chart at the beginning of my talks, because in a way it's what the mindset of people in general in the world have changed during the last 100 years, and you will see that the last 3 sets are basically divided in 20-20-20, and this 20 years from the century is ending very, very soon. So we need to see what is going to be behind 2020. But I will start with marine ecology. I will start with marine ecology. Back in my age, and I have Marco and Christos here, that they used to be like me, people that start his career working with worms, with polychaetes. At that time, we were just polychaete people, and I still do that basically by hobby. But after my thesis and after my first years, I decided to move into marine ecology. That's why I'm here, probably. And I was working in the States with a guy that also, as the one that was just teaching this morning, or talking this morning, they were part of a long-term ecological experiment in the States. Ivan Valiela in Woods Hole, working with John Teal, Sipowicz Mars, casing experiments, fertilizing experiments. This guy started to think about the creation of this book. They produced the book. In 1995, they made this book, Marine Ecological Processes. It's a very famous book in which you can find the basic knowledge about marine ecology. All these things are there. And this guy has done, I'm going to say, I'm a very good friend, also is a very good supporter of FC Barcelona, Ivan. And I'm going to see him in 30 days. He did different editions, and these different editions, when you see the difference between the one or the third, is basically that they introduce the word impacts, a word that I hate, impacts, are tendencies. But basically, the basis is there. Okay, so before to start to move into these messages that I want to pass to you and the way in which I'm going to approach my talk, just where we are. We live in this planet. We live in this planet in which we are growing 1.2% since we crossed the millennia per day. The last billion people came into the last 12 years, and we know in 2030 we will be 8.5. And we live in a planet that if you increase this 1 order of magnitude, we are producing a free market economy. We are just working in this production-consumption machine, in which if we don't consume, if we don't produce, the world goes bad. The economy says that if we don't grow in 3% per year, we are just entering a crisis. This is what we have had during the present millennia, bad because we have a big recession. Now we are growing a little bit bigger. And because of that, we have different megatrends that are just following these two big forces, population and affluence. And if we include here another factor with the technological factor, we have these big 9 megatrends that are right now facing the way in which we are living in the world. These 9 megatrends goes along with another one, which is the one that every time is repeated here, which is that we have an environmental crisis. And I think that these 10 megatrends are the ones that face the moment of our existence in the earth right now. So we have entered in this particular Anthropocene era, and we are modifying. We are a force, a big force. Humans, we are a big force that are modifying these Earth system processes, and including in these Earth system processes, the ones that relate with the marine ecology. Okay, just to give you another idea of what is this environmental moment in which we are. We have this population world. We live in a world with 1% increase in population growth. We live in a world that requires to growth in activities in 3%. We live in a world in which everything is accelerated, everything goes into an exponential way. We live in a world in which everything is connected, so the butterfly effect, everything is connected. And we live in this world of the donut, or or whatever you wanna call it, but in which we realize that we have these boundaries, we have these planetary boundaries, and these boundaries are there. And we live in a world in which people live well, but people live really bad. So and we are just accumulating social and environmental crises. Okay, let's go back to this timeline just to introduce another two things that for this talk about marine ecology are important. One is the blue growth. And I'm sorry, I'm going to put a phrase because what I want to say right now, which is in Spanish. Some of you can follow, but I'm going to put this because one thing that I think is very important, especially for young people, but I think for everyone, that this blue growth took a wave, get its wave after the Rio +20 conference, in which we start to talk about more and more about the situation in the oceans, and to try to get a better management related with ecosystem approach strategy that UN put at the end of the last century, a better management of these complex systems, and we start to talk about the blue economy. One of my missions these days is to form part of an interministerial committee in Spain, transposing the last directive we have of maritime and spatial planning, and provoking and doing the plans that we are just putting forward just to implement this particular directive there. 15 days ago, we made a meeting in Madrid. They presented us a draft, and we were revising this draft for the regional plans that we are going to put forward because of the directive, and that was in which they describe the blue economy. And this is basically what is here is something that is reported by the DG Mare in Brussels, and you can find this thing in many reports of the community. Okay, if you read that, this is what is traditional economy. This is the ocean economy. And this is not the blue economy. This is not the blue economy. So in a way, and this is going to be one of the messages, we need to teach people what is the status, what is the economy we want for the future. Because many of the jargon that we speak is not the jargon that they speak on the other side. This is my best definition of blue economy. I found that, and I recommend strongly this particular article of The Economist. I recommend strongly that you go through that, because this is what I think is a blue economy, something that you can differentiate for the ocean economy you are facing these days. And the difference goes in the two latest lines that says, in balance with the long-term capacity of oceans to support this activity and remain resilient and healthy. And what is resilient and what is healthy? This is some words that not everyone understands the same way. Okay, the other thing that I'm going to talk very quickly, but the thing also it's important, is the speech of Ban Ki-moon in 2013 that changed a little bit the way in which the United Nations wanted to put forward what right now we have the Sustainable Development Goals coming from the Millennium Development Goals and introducing the basis, this life support basis that we have, between them, the Sustainable Development Goal 14, life below water. Okay, now I'm going to give you a very, because we have only half an hour, and I'm mostly talking about the Mediterranean because it's the sea in which you are almost sleeping, Wolfram. I'm not. Wolfram, I'm going to talk about the Mediterranean. Don't sleep. We are friends. We were sharing this wonderful regional environmental change magazine, so we are friends. That's why, probably. So I will use this particular diagram that also relates with the long-term ecological research, and just to describe the seas and oceans as a social ecological system. And I'm going to use this framework, this driver pressure state welfare response framework, just to go through a very, very rapid description of the elements that form part of the situation of the oceans. But I want to emphasize here that this is basically this is our languages. If you go to the, I don't know why it gets in that way, but anyway, if we go into the socioeconomic part of the world, this is the language they use: impacts, effects, consequences, or impact and results, but impact, effect, consequences. And sometimes we put the impact here instead welfare, and the situation about languages sometimes gets difficulties in how we can relate one to the other, to these two worlds, environmental and socioeconomic world. Okay, well, I will use that. And just to go very rapidly through these different elements, the drivers, coming back to the economies, this is the drivers of the ocean economy. Those are the drivers of the ocean economy these days, and the traditional ones, the emerging ones, divided in a kind of classification. Here you have something called restoration, nature-based solutions. I think that this part of the economy, this part of the industries are not very well put there, but in the future, I believe there is plenty of room for industries, companies, activities in that world, but those are the drivers. If we move into the pressures, you probably know much better than me, all the work of Halbert, on the work of Michele in the Mediterranean, putting together the different layers from different pressures coming from different activities, try to get scores to each one, just to come up with one kind of map and follow this map through time to see in which way regions of the Med, regions of the world get more pressures or less than others. If we move into the States, we have in Europe, and I think that this is a great idea, the good environmental status. It's a great idea. Probably the accomplishment of the idea, the practical issue of the idea is still very soft, still very fluffy, but the philosophy behind is great. To describe which is the state of the city you want, and to restore most of these states to the vision that you have for the future. So we have these descriptors, we have indicators associated to the descriptors. The first day there was one guy here, one person here saying the minimum common denominator. Of course, this is based on the minimum common denominator by nations, but we have at least something that says, okay, this is the state we want, at least. So this is the state, and also we can put all together. We can try to relate drivers, pressures, and states. At the end, I'm going to give you some thoughts about what I'm doing right now. One of the latest things we did 2 weeks ago was to to make questionnaires to different science. It was around 40, a group of 40 science, to fill this particular matrix, putting the industries that directly or indirectly affects the sea, and see in which way can affect just perception, because at the end I will tell you something about what's a materiality matrix, but just perceptions about the industries affecting the different descriptors, the descriptors of the good environmental status. Okay, that's the perception of science. There is another perception coming from business. There is another perception coming from normal people. So the way you relate these perceptions is important. So you can relate these perceptions also. You can relate this perception also with the layers of pressures and with descriptors. So you have plenty of things that you can do today in addition to the normal marine ecology work you've done. So here you have three thoughts. On one way, just to help to understand what is this definition of the blue economy. This is, as I told you, it's not easy. In the meeting of Madrid, you saw the definition that was in the draft. I was there representing science, but there was another 2 persons representing the General Directorate of the Coast and the General Directorate of the Environment, and the rest were different people from different agencies that are activities on the sea and the militaries. There were 5 or 6 militaries there. Those guys doesn't know anything about the blue economy. Those guys doesn't know anything probably about the healthy environment. You need to teach them, and you need to tell them what needs to be done. And they are 18, you are 3. So here seriously, is a need of these languages. All the relation between drivers, pressure, and states, and also I think that we have a lot of possibilities if we start to work. By the way, the Sustainable Development Goal 14 is a kind of vision for the state of the sea global side. This is the vision that we have in Europe. So more or less we are working with the same concept, the same idea. So the only thing that this is much more developed. But this philosophy is okay, it's fine, it's fantastic. But we should try to get it not just in this minimum common denominator. We can sound the sea. We can just put different gens to work in different places and try to get better states in different locations. Okay, on the other side, we went to drivers, pressure, states. We have the 2 other components, the welfare and the response. When we talk about welfare, we are using these days, and you have seen in this particular conference many talks about ecosystem services. Here you can find it in this classification, but you can use other different types of classification. But finally, you get these particular ideas, and these particular ideas, you see, there are some ones that are just put it in blue, because those services can be differentiated to what is intermediate and final services. When you work as a marine ecologist, and you work in marine ecological processes, you work in primary production, you work in food webs, you work in direct relation between species, you work in geochemical cycles, you work in these things that basically these things are these intermediate ecosystem services. So in a way, you need to link the classical marine ecology science with the jargon that is used today in order to pass these ideas into the other side, which are the guys that are working in the socioeconomic arena. So you have this, then you have your final ecosystem services that are much easy to be understood by the other part, and then you finally get into the benefits. And if you want to see this and you want to pass these measures in a very, very simple way, I learned that, and I think it's great. I learned that from a Canadian professor. You can just say, as a journalist, you have no fish here, you have no fisheries, you have no fishermen. Very, very easy way to pass these three ideas. As a marine ecology, you work normally here, explaining why are not fish in the ocean. But in the future, you will need to explain all together. And this is part also of the role of science these days. Together with that, you go into benefits. The benefits of the ocean economy. The benefits of the ocean economy these days, which for the Mediterranean are those ones. This comes from another report we are just developing right now. So almost 400 billion yearly annual revenues. From this, the gross value add is 205, and 5 million jobs. Almost the person who speaks this morning was just also telling 5 million people dying because of healthy, not healthy food. Sorry. Okay, so those are the numbers, the benefits of the ocean economy. We need to keep these numbers, but transforming the economy. And we cannot do that if we are not working with the guys that are doing this activity, which is basically companies. Okay, so the Sustainable Development Goal 14 is here. Another one very, very important, and I think that we should try to get it much more on the issue is the Sustainable Development 17, which is partenariats, which is partnerships, which is working with the actors that are relating that, we will say. Very quickly about the Sustainable Development 14, because you can get this information basically through the web, but for the guys that are working on marine ecology, if you are working with eutrophication, plastics, those are the indicators of the target 1. If you are working on management, and in the way I work in management, in 5 minutes, no? 5 minutes. Oh, 6 minutes. And management, then you move into that. Acidification, you talk about acidification, is part of the target. Sustainable fisheries, MPAs, conservation issues, and then other issues that are much more related with other sustainable development goals, just to try to improve lives in other places of the world. Or this particular one, it's amazing that here, I don't know why, it's not marine science, it's just marine technology, but it's there, and you have different indicators just to work with this goal. In addition to everything that relates your business, your job with that, there are other documents, and I recommend to you to go through these 2 documents about the situation of the oceans, produced by the Global Commission of Oceans, in which they explain a lot about issues and a lot about why we are getting down and why we should go up. Okay, so here you have another 3 general messages that in which you can do something else besides the normal job of being marine ecologist, and relate that with sustainable development goals or with the situation in the environmental science. The final issue I want to bring up is the relation with the response. And here I'm working much more on the business side than on the policymaker side. I think that it's more important the business side than even the policy side. And one person, sorry about that. One person this morning said about this issue, So there are 2 words that connects this diagram from the 2 sides, which is our impact, and one very important, which is dependence. Business depends on the services provided by the sea, and we need to help to them to understand this issue. A business can be out of the issue because they don't put attention on that issue. And you know probably this guy was the secretary of the UNFCCC in the conference of Copenhagen, and this conference was a complete failure, and then he resigned, and when he resigned he said this phrase, which is exactly the same phrase that I want to bring to the response I want to show to you. Okay, business, you need to go to business to talk with guys, because these guys sometimes, you say that, these guys sometimes are prepared to hear you. And one of the differences that we have 10 years ago from now is that big corporations always have as chief sustainability officers. I used to work with polykids, now I work with chief sustainability officers. And those guys are prepared to hear you. And even are prepared that you mold you. They have, of course, their assumptions, they have, of course, their priorities, their objectives, but at least they hear you. We can use that. So I'm going to do a little bit of marketing. Sorry about that, but being here, I'm going to do a little bit of marketing. Those are ideas about how the sustainability incorporation have been done in the past. Give me 2 minutes. And sorry. And sorry about that. And they passed for a very preliminary one. They move into this one that is the one that every company is doing that day, which is the triple bottom line. We have produced a book right now, this book, this book tries to emphasize a new definition. Well, there are plenty of definitions of sustainable development, but a much more concise definition of sustainable development just related with the sustainable development goals. And in addition, we are trying to pass a new concept on the way in which companies should approach the future. A company that we name it Business in Nature, a company that pays attention not just on this creating shared value, on this corporate social responsibility that you already have of this triple bottom line, but also which is basically this. This is what today you find in business. But in addition to that, you need to put another pillar here, which is this pillar that you should not modify more Earth system processes, or even you need to restore these Earth system processes. And the point is that in order to do that, you cannot do it alone. And this is another thing that needs to be introduced in business. You need to work together. The work for business this millennia, or this century, is not competition but collaboration. And it goes much more on the Sustainable Development Goal 17. You need to do that for sure. Because if you don't collaborate, you cannot be effective. Others will take that. So they need to cooperate. Okay, so I will jump that. This is the, sorry. No thanks, no, not yet. 2 minutes, okay. So this is the project we are working with. I cannot present any information yet because it encompasses right now more than 50 companies, but we are going to have around 70 at the end, large multinationals in this project. You will hear something about that, but of course I don't have authorization to show you something more. But this is the kind of project directed to the response. Directed to the response, and also something new that we are preparing. Well, it's not prepared; it's already done. In Barcelona, we are developing a venture building platform, a platform just for marine restoration projects, in which we want to develop an equity fund. We have developed the equity fund, and we want to help people worldwide to develop marine restoration projects. Social ecological impact investment fund. Okay, so in addition to that, and those are the two conclusions, this message that we saw during the talk. Another one, which is important, which is do something else, which is not just use your science. Of course, you need to do your science. If you don't do your science, you will not go into the professional life. So you do your science, but also do something else. And this something else needs to be able to be ambassador of this change in lifestyles we need, or an influencer. You should be an influencer of influencers, because these influencers can influence others, and the people influenced can change the world in which we are living these days. We need to become influencers. And probably influence of young people, these young people that knows how to manage this kind of communications and how to move this wave in order to produce a change, because the change is completely needed. And finally, and just to say one thing, I wanted to say something about this particular nice auditorium, that if you go into this auditorium, you go into the walls, you will see that the gender parity in the walls is not too large. And I want to recognize Luis Saldaña, because in 1980 we have an Iberian symposium, Benzing symposium meeting here, and I met him, so thank you. But this gender parity that's in the walls is even better than the gender parity of the Nobel Prize of Economy. There is only one woman, only one female that won the Nobel Prize of Economy, Elinor Ostrom. And Elinor Ostrom, and I said about Elinor Ostrom because we heard the tragedy of the commons the first day. Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize of Economy reverting the tragedy of the commons, putting an economic theory to revert the tragedy of the commons at the local level. Okay, the mission of the young people in the audience is to take this theory and to bring this theory at the global level to revert the tragedy of the commons. I don't know for what reason you give a Nobel Prize to one person and then you don't use this theory that allows the guy to win the Nobel Prize. But this is the case in that. And I think that we need the time just to come again with the theories of Ostrom and try to save the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Rafael, for this very inspiring lecture with a lot of messages for the young people. So I would like to know now if there is small time for questions, but there will be some time for questions or comments. Yeah, there is
Don't
one.
be mad. Don't be mad with me.
Thank you. No, it was the part that I heard was a very good talk. Thank you. No, but my question is about corporate social responsibility. It's not a field that where I work very much with companies directly. I just have the feeling that it to bring us closer to the Sustainable Development Goals, you cannot just count on it alone. You actually have to have regulations, regulatory framework that allows companies to have a level playing field. I remember I was once talking to the acting technical director of a nuclear power plant. This was on the anniversary of the Chernobyl accident, and we were talking about nuclear power and so on. And he said, I don't need to do nuclear power. I can do other things. It's just that society puts me into a position where I do that. And if society wants something else, through a regulatory framework that actually affects everybody, not just me and my company, then I can do better or different or something else. Now, where do you think that this takes us with respect to your corporate philanthropy even and responsibility and the Sustainable Development Goals? Can we really count on businesses themselves without being regulated to bring us closer to sustainability?
Well, the answer very easy is not yet now. No, yet now. Talking about the nuclear power, also the issue is, I think I just raised the hands 2 or 3 times, and one of the times that I raised the hand during the conference was to say about externalities. The issue to have the nuclear power is because you don't count on the externalities. If you put the externalities on the issue, nuclear power will be just out of business for energy. But anyway, talking about corporate social responsibility, it's great that you put this, because in that case I have 1 minute just to explain better this particular slide, because I couldn't go through at that time. So this is the 20th century. Corporate social responsibility is something that companies should put ahead just 20 years ago, or even 25, 30 years ago. And although there are companies that are still talking about corporate social responsibility, today when we cross the millennia, and now companies are moving much more on, not just corporate social responsibility, but they are talking about sustainability in general. And sustainability in general, there is a very good article, very good paper that recommends to you, even if it's nothing to be with ecology, which is a Porter and Kramer paper saying creating shared value. And this creating shared value is the way in which companies today understand sustainability, having a positive impact on the economic side and on the social side, and not still these 3 pillars. Still companies are watching the movie as social, economic, and environmental. And this is the picture of the 20th century. You need to see the movie these days in socioeconomy and environment, and working together. We are in this social ecological paradigm. And this change is in production right now. And we have this positive thing creating shared value, but in addition, and this is something that it didn't land yet in business at all, is that we need this pillar. Because companies are isolated, and probably this pillar can be related with policy. Of course, I didn't say that the policy is not important at all. When I put the Ivo de Boer phrase, it says in addition to the policy, but the big transformation should come from business. But in addition, of course. But the point is that we need a new vision for the nature state, and this vision for the nature state, you can put a piece, but the great issue would be that all companies work together in partnerships, create these partnerships, just to do these collaborative agreements, to find standards, to find things that you cannot overpass, to try to put limits, to try to collaborate and to be eco-effective, not just eco-efficient.
Is there another question or comment? I have one Oh, okay. Yes, please. We take just yours. Yeah, no, just 1 second.
Okay, I don't have any question, just a comment.
How do you?
I'm not a marine ecologist, but I really thank you for this presentation because I think it can be shaped and rethought in many different parts of the economical world, even when it's not strictly related to marine ecology. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for your kind words. It's true. I agree 100% that if you take the examples, I put the examples on the terrestrial system, you can just hear the same. I'll try to put the message just for the guys that are marine ecologists to do, but it's exactly the same for terrestrial ecologists.
Yeah, okay. I have just well, it's both a comment and a question. It's because I also think it's very important what you said and can be applied. I work at the landscape level, not terrestrial landscapes, but I also could see a lot which could be useful. But my question is about the role of researcher, because I think when researchers approach companies, they want to continue doing their research, so they want to be analytical. They want the companies to help them in designing the research, asking questions, and then solving the questions. But the companies want to put in place solutions, so they are it's much more about design than about being analytical. The question is whether we, as researchers, are prepared for this, to work in the companies, even if we don't have all the evidence needed for that, to take the step, and they're making proposals together with the companies of what could be tested. Because this is a different role than what we are used to.
Yes, I will respond to this question coming in the reverse side. So in the 20th century, the role of companies was to be profitable and to stay longer. Now they get another role, which is the role of education people in order how to approach their they should be, but many companies are taking this role of education as seriously. The role of science is to do science. The role of scientists is to do your science, that's for sure. We paid for doing papers, for making projects, so we need to do science. But I disagree a little bit, I don't know if Osvaldo is here. No, he's not here, so I can disagree, not a little bit, I disagree with him in the fact that, because if not, we will enter in that discussion later. In the fact that we only need to do evidence-based science. I don't think that it is time just to be producing evidences. There are plenty of evidences. I say the one about climate change. We know climate change, and we know since the 90s that we will get in 2030, 450. We will have produced a lot of evidence. I think that the role of science, especially young people, is, well, is this one plus. There are other roles. They need to have the role of influencing people. You need to influence. We need to influence, even if we are 60 people, 60 old, very old anyway. We need to influence. We need to pass the message that what we know is something that if we don't reverse the situation, there was one question this morning about what will happen in 30, 40 years. Well, 30, 40 years is going to be wars everywhere. It's going to be a chaos. We'll have a lot of walls to avoid 1 billion people coming into Europe. This is the future. It's the Hollywood future. It's true, it's Hollywood future, but Hollywood is telling us what is going to happen, and we don't react. And we cannot react. We are not policymakers, but we can influence people. And I think that is one of the roles that we need to take. Sorry about that.